Explosion! FlyFox.
Walt Disney's Bambi is a great film. Its tried and true story and spectacular animation come together to make a wonderful work of art. The story of Bambi is simple. Bambi is born in the spring, the time of new life and rebirth. He begins to experience his life in the summer and autumn, learning about the dangers of life. Then winter comes. His mother is killed, and he goes away to be raised by his father, the Prince of the Forest. For Bambi, the death of his mother 2/3 through the movie signifies both his time to leave childhood and his emotional peak in which he must now progress into adulthood. The unfortunate part is that we don't see the emotional fallout of this loss, except for the lone tear that runs down Bambi's face. The response of the individual to a piece of art or entertainment is a unique response, which can never be duplicated. Each person responds in his or her own way. Usually, I value story over visuals. I like Pinocchio more than Snow White because I find actual, teachable themes in Pinocchio. Bambi is great because of its atmosphere. The animation is gorgeous, with painstakingly realistic movements and mannerisms for a whole host of forest animals. The Disney shorts had alternated between semi-realism and outright cartoonishness prior to Bambi. This is most evident in Snow White, where rotoscope was used to mirror human-like movements, and realism was brought in through simulated depth and high-quality art. All this realism only showed how cartoony the animals in Snow White were. Of course, one can hardly expect Disney to concentrate on making the animals in Snow White realistic, as they were hardly the focus of the film. And doing so would only have made the film more expensive and possibly lessened the margin for profit. The animation in Bambi is one of the best examples of the Disney artists getting to show their creativity. In Snow White, we saw traditional film theory being used to heighten suspense, and in Pinocchio we saw the beautifully rendered world around Pinocchio in a way only animation could accomplish. In Bambi, we see the first use of multiple styles to convey emotional and visual changes. For example, the scene where man first appears is a very chaotic and frightening scene, not only because of the connotations of danger it presents, but also through the use of differing art styles. The use of multicolored deer bounding around out of danger is superb in illustrating the danger of the scene. Clearly, something is happening here that is in stark contrast to the serene, peaceful beauty of the forest that we have seen before. We also see use of beautiful silhouette to frame characters against a bright background. We see the use of a cloudy foreground to emphasize the confusion and sadness Bambi experiences after the death of his mother. And we, of course, see the beautiful animation of the animals throughout the whole film. The scene in which Bambi's mother is killed is animated strikingly, with symbolism and personality that communicates the confusion and sadness perfectly. Bambi's mother points out that spring is on the horizon. They begin to eat some of the grass they have found, but then the music changes and becomes ominous. Bambi's mother senses danger and looks around. The two begin to run away. Bambi is shown alone, and then throughout their flight, distance is emphasized between Bambi and his mother. The gunshot rings out and Bambi is shown to be totally alone. He soon realizes his mother is not with him. He leaves the thicket and snow is now falling. This snow makes the coming of spring seem a lot further off than we had thought, and along with the somber music suggests that perhaps the next scene will be something entirely different than we had hoped. The falling snow clouds the screen and produces an almost misty-eyed effect, which reflects the sadness and anticipation of tragedy. This scene illustrates the beauty and artistry of the early Disney animation at its best. Bambi is not perfect. No movie is, but Bambi's flaws are small. The often justifiably derided cut between total despair at the death of Bambi's mother to the annoying birds chirping is so sudden and violent a shift that it calls into question the motives behind that cut. Obviously, the idea was to soften the blow of losing Bambi's mother, but because the jump is so sudden, it's impossible to really comprehend the moment. Disney would learn from its mistake in later films, especially The Lion King, in which they allow for the sadness to sink in before they pull out to the comedy relief. But of course, they would still go from the sad point of the film into an attempt at cheeriness. Another thing I'd like to talk about is the portrayal of hunters in children's films. The hunter gets a bad rap. The two opposite ends of the spectrum are the unseen malevolent force, as in Bambi, or the psychopathic poacher, like in Rescuers Down Under, with a gradient shade in between that touches upon all the points of how hunting is bad, without touching ever upon the idea that just maybe hunters actually like nature and really are big conservationists who want to see the animal population remain vibrant and plentiful. In Bambi, the hunter is unseen. Only his actions are seen, and especially heard through gunshots. This scene, in which the hunter shoots wildly at any and every animal, portrays the hunter as if they have no motive beyond killing the innocent woodland creatures. This isn't how responsible gun owners and hunters act. Hunters just can't seem to get an accurate picture of themselves in films. As we move beyond the simple theme of growing up and look at Bambi through a Christian lens, we can be reminded through the beautiful art and the representation of God's created order of just how nature testifies to God's majesty and power. Every creature is a work of art given to us as a gift from God, His wondrous power having created a beautiful ecosystem for us to enjoy. An interesting thing to know is that in the original Bambi novel, the book ends with Bambi's father taking him to see the body of a man who has been murdered. It is here that Bambi realizes that it is not man who is all-powerful, but that there is another who is above all nature. Indeed, Bambi realizes that God is sovereign over all nature. When we watch such a rich and vibrant portrayal of nature, let us dwell upon He who created all things. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds." And it was so. Genesis 1:24. As a deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you, O God. Psalm 42:1. It really is too bad that Disney did not allow for this conclusion of the Bambi story. It could have put the whole interaction with man in another light, one that would have added additional depth and gravitas to the story. However, it shouldn't surprise anyone that such a dark and yet poignant moment would be removed from the Disney adaptation. Other than the unfortunate attempt to save children from their sadness, and the lack of the powerful conclusion of the novel, Bambi really has few flaws that I wish to elaborate on. As much as I dislike the overall portrayal of hunters in children's films, Bambi doesn't have an anti-hunting message. It's not anti-gun or pro-PETA, it's just an honest and frightening look at growing up through the eyes of a deer, and ultimately, through ourselves.
Explosion! Fly Fox!